We have a question from online from Hillary Polevsky. Does the exports plan include leaving autonomous assets at process study sites throughout the year or only during ship-based cruises?
All right, so the autonomous assets, and this came up, I think, later in Meg's platform. An important part of exports is to cover the entire annual cycle with autonomous platforms. And so there'll be both gliders and floats out through the entire year. Deployments overlap during the ship occupation period, so there'll actually be a denser network of autonomous assets potentially out during the ship periods.
I had a question up in the back here. I realize this isn't a survey program per se, but it seems like these two cruises might become a very valuable template for other organizations or other nations that want to do similar studies in other basins. And I was just wondering how the program is sort of looking forward to that potential scenario. And I'm sort of thinking by analogy with programs like geotraces or ocean acidification, where there's an infrastructure for like best practices, intercalibration, forums for what types of methodologies work best, that kind of thing that would help organizations in the future.
So that was something that has been discussed because that's a major challenge. There are basically two different models that might work for collaborations, particularly international collaborations. One of them is actually either sending a person or bringing another ship out so that, actually there's probably a continuum, having a ship out there at the same time, in the same place, having a ship out there in between major cruises. Or another model is like comics, going to another part of the ocean and characterizing different types of states. One of the major challenges is the timing. And so the timing is like there's uncertainty, as Meg said, in terms of, is this going to go forward? Is this going to go forward on, what time scale? And so all of those collaborations really require a lot of legwork and dedicated, intensive commitment to make it work. So it is a major challenge.
Just to add to that, we have been active looking for potential international collaborations already as part of the science definition team work. And so there are a number of groups out there who either already have programs spun up or in the process of applying for programs. And the intention is very much that if we liaise with those and we maintain our sort of close discussion with them, then we can actually try and make sure that measurements that are made are consistent across different cruises, even if they're taken out by different countries in different locations. So I think it's a valid point, but we have at least got the foundation set for them, and we know the people who we should be talking to.
Can I make one suggestion for people that are asking questions, for the early career people that are learning this community, to say who you are and where you're from?
Okay. I also want to pop a mic out to Uda to also, if you don't mind, speaking a little bit about international collaborations that we've been.
Actually, I don't have that much to add. We made a huge table collecting data, and that's also published with the implementation plan. We made a huge table from all the projects which we know of, which internationally are happening, or bound to happen, or planned to happen, or already ongoing. And it becomes very clear that if exports is going forward, that then one will have to see exactly how collaborations can be, but that some of them will be mostly per content because people are working at similar questions, but the projects are already ongoing and they can't maybe adapt to exactly what exports is doing, whereas other projects are being created right now to specifically fit exports, and so one might have actually ships at the same time. So there's a whole span of projects. And the table we have is surely not complete either, so that's another thing which can be added to doing this period of getting feedback.
We have a question
Okay,
over here.
a question. Cindy Lee, Stony Brook University, soon to be part of the Bainbridge Island Institute of Retired Oceanographers. And there are a lot of us there, so come visit. I have 3 big points, or 3 points. They're not necessarily big. I would like to object to this Donald Trump view of oceanography of scientific research, which is black, we don't know anything, we have to go out and do all of this. You know, we know a huge amount. We really know a lot. And I don't think that this document makes that clear enough. You know, some of the questions being asked are the same questions that were asked during Vertex, which was before the GOPS that Mark mentioned earlier, which, by the way, had plenty of biologists at it, but that's beside the point. Okay, and so I think we need to make a bigger point about what we do know, and a positive point, because it's a real disservice to the huge amount of agency funding that has gone into these programs for 40 years. So let's make more about what we do know before each of these questions. Like we know a lot about how much carbon is coming out of the euphotic zone. We really do. So focus then on the next step. So I would like a more positive view of that. Now, in the individual talks, that came out more. But in the document itself, I didn't see that. Okay. And one reason why I think that may have occurred is my second point, and that is synthesis. JGOVS, for example, got partially into synthesis, but not completely. Now, synthesis is not modeling alone. Synthesis is also a scientific synthesis. And to shortchange synthesis in your program, I think is a terrible thing. I think that should be front and center, because that is what makes it on to the next step. And while I'm talking about synthesis, I want to say how important it is for all the young people here to read the literature. You know, there's a huge amount of information out there, and it's hard to read it all. But if you don't read it all, you'll just be doing the same experiments that we've done for many years in the past. And I see that now every day I read a paper that, you know, I knew the answer to 30 years ago. Okay, and the third one is mechanisms. Okay, mechanisms are really important. You all made that very clear. But how are you going to do mechanisms from satellite? I don't see that link in the project. And now there can be experiments. I think an experimental approach is necessary, and that can be done on shipboard. But I'd like to see more about that in the document as well. Okay, thank you.
Maybe we can break Cindy's comments down in a few chunks, maybe to tackle the first point.
I'll try to do a bit of an overview, and then I'll pass
Okay.
it on. I would recommend everybody go back to read the science plan. So the implementation plan was really, we were really trying to get down to the nuts and the bolts. The science, well, I do think there are elements of the science plan that talk about what we know and what we don't know. But here we're really looking at the implementation plan moving forward. The science plan is set. I would say within the science plan and also within the implementation plan, there is actually a substantial focus on synthesis, which was your second point. We talk about data products, that these different project teams would be working together to produce synthesis products. Yeah, well, let me just finish, Cindy. As part of phase one, the synthesis products and data products were supposed to be generated by the project teams. Phase two would then work with the groups that had put the data products together, the synthesis products, and then move into a next phase of synthesis and modeling. I think we would all like to make sure that there's both phase one and phase two, but there is synthesis embedded in both of those. And these are alternatives and options. You know, I think we'd all like to see the final goal phase. And then I'll turn it over to somebody want to address the final question about mechanism. Okay, so your final was, you know, what we're trying to get from the ship-based measurements and the autonomous measurements and a lot of the process studies is a mechanistic understanding that then could be used to augment satellite remote sensing moving forward. What we're really trying to do is given an observational context, whether it's remote sensing or bioargo or other things we can put in the water, if we have enough process understanding built from the ship-based measurements, then we can move forward in time after exports to really embed that into diagnostic and prognostic models. You're never going to get that from satellites alone, and that's why we need this extensive ship-based program. Well, yeah,
So maybe I can add something. Experiments are suggested in the implementation plan to be included. Experiments on zooplankton production rates of fecal pellets, experiments on aggregation and disaggregation rates, because you're right, those are really important parameters. Maybe you're right, maybe that is one thing which needs to be strengthened in the implementation plan, so that might be a good comment. But yes, we did discuss them, they are supposed to be in there and they are mentioned, but if they're not prominent enough to make it clear to people that they're part of it, then that needs to be changed.
Could I just make one other comment? One of the unique aspects of the exports program is the complementarity and the simultaneous measurement of all of the pathways. You look at so many papers and it's zooplankton and grazing and respiration, but there's missing components on the DOC quality. One of the attempts of the science plan and the implementation plan was to try to have a very complete program so that things were done together, so you don't have to say, well, by difference, I think that this is what really solves the budget and closes the budget. The other aspect that is really different is the focus on a nested sampling scheme for biogeochemistry, which really, it has been done for physics, but not for the biology and the biogeochemistry. And I still remember when I first went to NSF in 1980 as a program manager, I inherited the Warm Core Rings program. And that was the first time that people were looking at, big scale eddies. And I remember flipping through the jacket, because it was a paper jacket at that time, and here's a review saying, why are they picking this piece of the ocean? Why don't they just go study the ocean? And so we've gone in, 35 years from, understanding mesoscale, big eddies to now the sub-mesoscale. And I think if we're ever going to really understand processes, because processes act on an organism-organism interaction and their effect by the sub-mesoscale, if we're going to move the field forward, we have to do that, and we can't just forever, and that includes the models too. We can't ignore the fact that what the real physics is.
We have one more comment from a SDT member, and then we're going to move to over to the floor.
I agree. It is very important to show all the tremendous work that has taken place in the past and through different campaigns. Satellite observations and the continuity is a critical point. Maybe we can emphasize that in the final product, the report of the STD. But I want to make clear that what this prior knowledge has pointed to is the large uncertainties. Right now, the uncertainties in the carbon export, the processes, it has pointed out, it has clarified the processes. We know what the processes are. We were able to formulate the 5 pathways because we built on the prior knowledge. But still, what remains is the quantitative identification of these processes. The uncertainty is very large. We saw that the uncertainty is as large as the anthropogenic signal. We don't know the sign of the export, the sinking rate. So the sinking profile. So I think that this is what this campaign is going to come in and put some in.
A question over here. Susan Shanong, NASA Ames. My question has to do with the remote sensing part of this mission. In your nominal schedule, PACE doesn't launch until after exports is over. So what satellite data will you be using in combination with exports?
Is this on? Did you prefer the other one? No, that's a great question. Actually, the way I view it is that this is ideal timing for the exports project, because it's going to allow us, I mean, we can do measurements of optical properties from the ships, right? We can start looking at how you build algorithms from the types of information we get from PACE, so that you can start establishing the path forward. So when we actually launch PACE, we're ready to go with those kinds of algorithms. We're a step ahead. Does that make sense? So, you know, we don't need PACE data in order to move forward with, you know, the science we're trying to do with PACE. We can get that kind of hyperspectral information with in situ radiometry and say that that's a simulation of what PACE will give us, and we can start building those algorithms ahead of time so we're actually prepared when the mission flies.
I understand that. There's a sentence in the implementation plan that says satellite data will be used to guide the measurements, and maybe if that's not going to be true, that sentence shouldn't be in there.
Yeah, so that's kind of a different question. I believe, and you guys can correct me if I got this wrong, but what we're talking about there is we have VIIRS up. We may have MODIS for a little bit longer, but the idea there is that you can use the satellite data to guide where you locate those studies in the field, right? You can look for features with the satellite data and say, okay, I want to actually move the ship over here and study this area here because there's a feature that we want to target. So that was more about using the satellites as an asset to inform the field campaigns, not necessarily about the algorithm development.
Phil?
I just
Oh,
want, and
sorry.
there is international ocean color data as well. I mean, this is, you know, we provide our data to the world, and there's also opportunities to use ocean color data in collaboration with other nations. So it's not just VIIRS, but VIIRS is certainly important to the program.
Philip Boyd, IMAS Australia. From an overseas sort of viewpoint, it's very exciting to... sorry.
Bobby Anderson's next.
From an overseas standpoint, it's very exciting to see the exports rollout and to see a sort of three-dimensional view of the biological pump emerging, which is, we know where we have to go, so take a pat on the back. And I'll just follow up in terms of implementation. How many of you are aware that as part of the UK component of JGOFS, in 1990 in the Northeast Atlantic, there was a two-ship process survey quasi-Lagrangian study. And so all I want to point out is that there's a few examples out there of quasi-Lagrangian and or controlled volume experiments for some of the geotraces process studies, some of the ocean in situ ion fertilization studies that looked at both the surface and the subsurface that it might be worth having a peek at. So for example, this 1990 study in the wash-up, they found that there was slippage between the surface mixed layer where the Lagrangian float was actually then located halfway down in the mixed layer and the layer underneath it. Some of the other experiments we've done with SF6, you find out all sorts of unpleasant and unpalatable things where you actually have two SF6 labeled components of the seasonal surface mixed layer, 50 meters deep, sliding one on top of each other and going in different directions. So there's a few things that might be worth having a look at. You probably won't sleep at night, but at least you'll know about it before rather than after the fact. Thanks.
Okay, so this is Bob Anderson from Lamont. I just want to follow up on comments from Cindy and Jim based on our experiences in geotraces. First with synthesis, it's great that, as Mary Jane pointed out, that exports would be measuring everything at once, but part of synthesis is comparing everything. And in geotraces, we're just completing, in the region downwind from the Sahara, comparing 8 different in situ strategies for evaluating dust input to the ocean. And the results differ by nearly 2 orders of magnitude. This is just for dust input to the ocean. So we've got to be rigorous all the time about intercomparisons, intercalibration. Jim's point about the infrastructure for intercalibration, it's a huge part of geotraces. And even when we're careful, we still find that different methods for measuring iron can diverge by 20 or 30%. And we just have to be on top of that all the time. And this leads to my question. I just scanned the implementation plan for exports and looked at the measurements table, and I don't see anything about iron or other micronutrients. So is this because you think that micronutrients don't play a role in export?
I'll let it. Does anybody on the panel want to respond to that? I'll let you take that, Scott.
I don't think that was not an attempt to say that something isn't important. I think it's trying to balance what we can do within the constraints of the ship. And there was discussion of how much do we want to emphasize sort of the primary production end and the controls on primary production versus the fate. And I think, that would be a great comment, and that's something that we would love that input. Is we had to sort of balance out the different pathways, and that, wasn't emphasized.
And I guess another point is that's a really good example of you seeing a potential gap and a proposal writer seeing a potential gap and making a strong case that that has to be in there. And I think that's part of the innovation and the creativity part. And so this is exactly why we're coming together. If that is a gap, then perhaps that really should be addressed.
Hi. Julie Granger, Yukon. So because of all these simultaneous measurements, it would also be a great opportunity to do novel science. So I heard whispers about maybe NSF kind of thinking of a program to piggyback along, but something where you could try things that haven't been ground truth yet, and in the context of all the measurements of export. Has that been discussed?
Okay, I'll open my mouth again. I think that, for the NSF people in the room, having once been a rotator, very often, NSF is the one that's leading the charge and is leveraged against. Here's a fantastic opportunity to leverage against NASA. Here's a framework of measurements, of collaborations. And so it would be a real missed opportunity not to embed some of the science of the biological pump in this richer, detailed context. And no offense to our European and Asian colleagues, but it would be a real travesty if this doesn't go forward and all the ideas are out there. Sorry, Adrian. I'll buy you a beer. But this is a tremendous opportunity for leveraging.
Don't worry, Adrian won't be European much longer.
I just have a quick follow-up question to that sort of thing, which is I don't have experience with these sort of NASA field programs, and probably a lot of people don't. Could you give a quick overview for how the science project teams will be selected? Will it be the scientific steering committee? Will it go out to external review? How do the solicitations and review processes happen?
I'm going to ask Paula to answer that question, or Laura.
I don't think the community is going to be selecting those. I think the agency is going to be selecting those. I have a couple of plans. I've briefed my management on how we might execute. I can't tell you because you wouldn't be able to compete. I can tell you that there are many, many, many field campaigns, both within this community, lessons learned from GLOBEC, from JGOFS, from other large field programs, from internal NASA programs going on right now, like above. Where I'd say if you're thinking about competing for exports and you have not gone into NASA and read some of the existing solicitations that are in the archives on field campaigns, you're a leg down, okay? Because they clearly spell out approaches that the agency uses to make those selections. The other piece that I would say is that I don't know if that fully gets at your question, Robin, but the other piece I would say is, I'm sorry, who asked it? I'm sorry, up there. Okay, I thought Robin has the microphone, so I thought she asked it, and I can't see. The other piece is the time to start thinking about how you might respond, and the time to pick up the implementation plan, the science plan, is not when the solicitation is released, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, you should be looking through that now, and if you haven't, I strongly encourage you to do that because. From the first round of the competition for the data mining and OSSI work, it was very clear to 25 of your closest friends that served as reviewers who read the plans and who has not. And I can see that within minutes of picking up a proposal. So I say that because even though if we went with the goal plan and the agency put up the $72 million to proceed, no matter what, that does not mean we are going to get the response on all the aspects of the science in the implementation plan that are listed. And it doesn't mean even if we get those proposals that the agency will select or be able to select science that does not peer review well. So keep that in the back of your head. We have ideas about how the interaction between the selected projects and some sort of steering committee or science group or the leader and team leaders, however that's called for, might go. But I'd worry more right now about providing feedback on the implementation plan and options. So sorry, that was a little bit longer in answer, but I wanted to get all that in.
I'm going to grab the mic. I think we might have a... Yeah. Okay.
Okay, my name is Joachim Goyce. I'm from Lamont Doherty at Columbia University. I just wanted to add to what Mike said in response to the question about satellite ocean color data and the delay in getting PACE data. I think there are plans among certain groups to launch drones and use sensors that are very close to the PACE sensor that will be used during the field campaign. So that aspect can be translated to a full mission. But my question is about the flow diagrams that we have seen. And I've been working a lot in the tropics, and some of the things that Scott alluded to in his talk about the increase in stratification, warming, acidification, hypoxia, and so forth, we are seeing a transition to organisms that are more mixotrophic. And I don't see that explicitly there in the plans. We treat diatoms separately, smaller picoplankton, and zooplankton separately, but we don't talk about this entity that are called mixotrophs that are capable of doing both. And I'm not sure whether the present models have got mixotrophs embedded in them. Thank you.
And that's a great ad for some talks this afternoon. I think Holly's in the audience. Holly Muller will be giving a mixotrophy talk, so I stand by for the afternoon.
Hi. See if it's on. Hi, I'm Robin Conmey from US EPA. I'm curious about whether or not anybody on the exports implementation team has been engaging with the scoping activities for the Arctic Colors field campaign that we're going to hear about at the end of the week. I ask it because after reading through the implementation plan for exports and then also looking through the scoping planning documents, there's a great deal of overlap between the focus areas and the parameters of interest for both plans. So one, of course, yours being subarctic in 2 ocean basins, and theirs being Arctic in the Chukchi and Beaufort Sea. But I'm wondering if we would have a missed opportunity if there isn't, sort of extending to your comments about making sure that the measurements and approaches, that there is some standardization so that we could be in a position where, although your campaign doesn't overlap with the PACE program, Arctic Colors does. So if there could be good algorithm development that at least in those basins and subarctic that happen, then when PACE is launched and when Arctic Colors, if it does in fact happen, we could be in a position that we could really strengthen that program as well. So I'm just curious if there's been some planning for you all and your committee to kind of engage with the Arctic Colors folks.
Is there anyone that wants to respond to that?
Ken, do you want to?
Yeah, so at this point, Robin, no. And I think partly that's the, the out of phase in terms of the planning for the two. But I think you bring up a really good point in terms of cross-calibration of methods, of sensors. So one of the big challenges in a program like this is making sure that all sensors are rigorously cross-calibrated. But you also address the issue of cross-calibration across major field campaigns. And I think that's a really good point, and it's something that, if exports does go forward and if Arctic Colors does go forward, that there should be representation on steering committees.
I think we had a question from an online person.
Less of a question and more of a comment from Astrid Schnetzer from North Carolina State. She says the opportunity to incorporate novel molecular and biogeochemistry tools to interrogate some of these long-standing questions is one of the most exciting aspects of an export program.
Two comments. One is just to explicitly state that anybody in this room that thinks large programs in ocean science are needed, whether it's on this topic or other topics, really needs to show their support by sending an email to the NASA people that Paul is trying to convince to spend this kind of money. And that is Jack Kay, and that's also Mike Freelick. I hope I said his name right. And if you want NSF to be supportive of this and to hop on this bandwagon, Don Rice is here, Jim Murray is here, and Lisa Clow. Those are the two. Rick Murray. Damn it. I did that. Okay, I know who you are. I really do. Is we need a tremendous amount of energy from leaders in our field have gone into putting this together. And if we can't take this across the finish line, it's going to really put a damper on programs in the future. So show your support, send an email. It doesn't have to be a tome, but that you think this is an important question. And they're addressing important issues that we need to get a handle on, not only in our field, in this country, but also for the planet. And my second, this is just a comment to Cindy Lee's comment about we're kind of losing touch with the old literature that taught us so much. All of you that are editors or associate editors in journals, limiting the number of references you allow on paper, in papers now, is really pushing that along. So don't do it anymore. Well, so you know what? Fight. We provide the content. We should grab some control back from the publishers. But we need to have that corporate memory, and we're going to lose it if we can only have 20 references, and you look stupid if you don't cite anything, after 1980.
And I'd also like to just, I guess I'm double mic'd here, but challenge some of the senior leaders in the field. Review articles are such a great on-ramp for people getting their nose in the literature. So I encourage those of you, particularly if you have some time available, I know how time-consuming those articles are to write, but they're so valuable to our community. So that's also a legacy product. And so I welcome those.
Daniel Harrison from the University of Sydney. I'm an early career researcher. I've just handed in my PhD, and I'm lucky enough to come across today, but I think it's just so exciting, us that are at the beginning of our careers in this area, between the PACE mission and this, these are the big field programs and remote sensing programs that are going to be happening during our kind of mid-career. And I just wondered, besides what's happening here today and the lunch and everything, how does the science definition team plan to engage early career researchers and provide them the opportunity to really be involved from the start of this?
Thanks for your comment. I echo all of what you said. So I think here at the meeting in the near term, there's going to be, come have lunch at an exports table and talk with the science definition team about any questions or comments that you have. But the rest, okay, sorry. As far as exports moving forward, if it moves forward, I think engaging early career people will be, like, every role in the program is going to be competed, and there's going to be lots of opportunities for everybody to jump in. So, yeah.
And I would also say that we're having this conversation because this implementation plan is open for comments. So please be engaged with it. Don't wait for it. If you've got a great idea or see something that really could or should be done, this is a great time to weigh in. End of summer activity. Debbie?
I'm Debbie Steinberg from Virginia Institute of Marine Science. I just wanted to respond to what Astrid Schnetzer said, which I think really gets at some of the, for me, what's exciting about exports is that we are now at a stage where we do have lots of new technologies that we can throw at these science questions, including the molecular methods and some of the autonomous sampling, all sorts of things. And so this is why now, what is different from what we've already done before, and that's just one example, I think. And so, and that's really important, and I just want to throw that out there.
Hi, Julie Granger again. Just a clarification based on Paula Bontempi's explanation of how this was going to be funded, because this isn't peer-reviewed. If I, as a younger person, have never applied for NASA funding, do I even stand a chance of getting funded here? Or because I don't know how NASA works or things like that?
Wow, okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, we put out an omnibus solicitation each year. The Science Mission Directorate at NASA is $5.5 billion. We make a large amount of that available. It is open to anybody. There's no bias. I would say, I have not run the statistics on this, but every single one of your colleagues in here wants to see junior people succeed. There is no question that you are the wave of the future, right? They want to train people. They want to bring them on. They want them working with them. I would go so far as to say, all things being equal, the agency is always looking for opportunities for junior people. There are even specific calls like the new investigator program where you only compete with other people who are within their 5 years of their PhD, okay? I'm certain NSF has an analog. I'm sure many of the departments and agencies have this opportunity. The things that will sink your proposal, I will reiterate, is if it is obvious you have not read the science plan, if it is obvious you are not, you did not read the solicitation. I mean, I will use the example that I recently did a solicitation at NASA where there was a line that read, no new field work should be proposed, and literally 50% of the proposals proposed new field work. It was 3 paragraphs, okay? Those proposals will not be getting funded. That's the way it goes, okay? It's not rocket science, people, and I don't mean to make a joke there, okay? Junior people, more than welcome. If you have an idea for a proposal and the solicitation comes out, I would say email me. I get like 600 a day. My phone never rings. Just call. I'm happy to talk about it with you. Anything we can do to get people who are even not necessarily junior but haven't ever come to NASA with a proposal, let's talk about it. Let's get you on the right track, because the program is not going to work unless we get the right pieces of the research in place, right? Okay.
Paula, can you just briefly comment on the fact that this is a peer-reviewed process? I think that would be helpful.
Yes, all competitive proposals that come into NASA go through external peer review. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, so fully vetted by the peer community.
So I'm Amla Mahadevan from Woods Hole. So I feel that the exports is embedded in a very dynamical physical flow field. And I have a little bit of concern that the implementation plan doesn't really speak to it, although it may be implicit, and the word submesoscale shows up in a number of places. But I think a comment I have is that if enough care is not paid to actually measuring that submesoscale physics and dynamics, which in itself is very challenging, but has been addressed in other programs, I think we may lose the link between what we're seeing in exports and the physical variability in the ocean. And I think that unearthing that physical link is very important. So I think that, if there isn't explicit funding for this, I think that's where maybe some other parts of the National Science Foundation could step in and provide that sort of physical integration. And also in planning the field work, it's really important up front to have that in the plan. Thank you.
Okay, if I can reply to that. Megan and Rue didn't really have the time to go into the details of the implementation plan, but capturing the physics, particularly at the submesoscale, is one of the main aims of the implementation plan. And so, for example, one of the things that the the survey ship will be doing is continuously mapping the area around the float at a resolution that enables the sub-mesoscale circulation to be deduced. So that's going to be running throughout every one of the cruises that takes place. In addition, we were going to have our glider deployments out there, which are going to be providing a larger scale context for understanding the processes like frontogenesis that may lead to the sub-mesoscale circulations. So even though it may not have come across in the talks today, and I'm guilty as that as anybody, you shouldn't think it's not there. I would recommend that you go and look at the implementation plan, and you'll see that the sub-mesoscale is very strongly written into exports, both in terms of the phase 1 and also in terms of the phase 2, how that's then taken on into the modeling.
And quick clarification on the gliders. There's the autonomous plan has kind of two flavors of glider deployments, the large scale that Adrian mentioned, and also gliders that are closely targeting the Lagrangian float to provide spatial context on the sub-mesoscale.
But just, Amal, I appreciate the comment. I mean, I do think there's a lot of opportunities. You know, we've talked about how there might be interaction between NSF from the biological or the chemical side. I think there's opportunities here for the physical side, both in terms of field work and then the synthesis and modeling. There's a lot of expertise, you know, coming out of, you know, for example, the climate process teams that have worked on sub-mesoscale and some of the field work. So I think this is another potential cross-agency interaction point.
Okay, we'll take one final comment and then lunch, but I really encourage over the course, one of the reasons we're starting the meeting here is to encourage conversation, so we'll.
Melissa Oman, URI. So just in the vein of Amala's comment and some of the other things that I'm hearing, Mike's presentation from this morning, there are sort of some parts of processes or questions that we don't fully know yet. And so I hope that those 3 PI projects that were unallocated in the categories of different types of measurements are protected.
Great, thank you. Can you join me in thanking our panel this morning? Heather, did you have any announcements before lunch?